Alright, so this is about how I made a Burley trailer capable of being pulled by my dog. So I know some of you wanted to see that. So we'll start back on the trailer end. It has these two brackets that normally the arm that comes with it would go through that connects up to a bike. So just took that out, and then this is a cotter pin in the back one. So I just had to drill a hole through this piece here. And what I'm using is just some PVC pipe, which is the gray underground rated stuff, just because it's a bit more flexible in really cold weather if I was going to use this in the winter. And this is a little more complicated than it needs to be just for this project, because I actually had these pipes from before to use with myself pulling a sled. And you can see that there's actually a break in them, and that's because at the time I wanted to make it so that I could put this all in the trunk of the sedan I had at the time. You'll certainly have an easier time if you just use a single solid piece. It's just a little unwieldy when it's a bit longer like that. But you can see I have these other strings that are holding that together, and there's actually a fabric strap that runs through the whole pipe end to end, and that's what the carabiners are on the end for. They're holding that in, and that's what keeps that joint from separating. And if you just had a solid piece, you wouldn't have that, or if you had that joined permanently. Another approach to doing this, if I was going to do it again, might be to just drill a hole through that and put another cotter pin through there, rather than try to deal with that strap, because that's kind of a pain. But on this end, it's fairly straightforward. You just have the cotter pin through it. You just had to drill through top to bottom. And then I have some more of this cord. This part I do need, which is just tied onto this bracket right there. And just have a loop of that, one on each end. This is maybe not the best choice of material. This is just some really cheap utility cord. It's not the strongest stuff in the world, so if you were pulling a really heavy load or you were going to be really remote and were worried about it, you might want to use something a bit stronger. But I had a bunch of this around the house and it's really easy to work with, so there's that. Then getting up to the dog harness. Now there is a key here. This is not just a regular X-back harness. This is a carting or drafting harness. And the key thing there is up towards the front. There's a strap that goes around, and it functions like a belly band. You can actually see that there's a connection here that's going to connect under the bottom of the dog. But on the side of that, there's these loops that are sewn in. And those give me a spot for the poles to go through and hold them in place. Because otherwise, the trick with this kind of thing, when you're not working with just a solid attachment like you do to the bike, you have to worry about both the tracking, getting it to go in a straight line, which is really hard if you're just working with a rope connection like this. The other possibility is you could rig up somehow a solid arm that would come from the trailer up to the dog. That'd be a lot more fabrication than I've done here, and it would still be a little funky. And then you also need to have a way to stop the trailer from continuing to roll forward when the dog stops. So like up here, because I am using this weird rope to hold the pipe together, I just have a nice handy spot where it's tied and it stops there. So that's actually running on one side through that loop and the other side not, and there's a knot there. That knot actually exists just as something to pull on when I'm trying to get this strap through the pipe. If you weren't doing that approach, just drill a little hole here and put a little piece of cord. All that does is so when that's rolling and your dog stops, the pipe wants to go forward, and it gives it something to push up on the dog a bit, so that it holds it in place so the trailer doesn't just run into the dog from behind. So you need a carting or drafting harness. This one is from Black Ice, but that doesn't really help you because they're going out of business. Otherwise, this is a relatively easy modification to make to an existing harness if you did have just an X-back. You can see they're just taking one more piece of webbing, laid it straight across, sew it in at both of those points at an angle, and then it wraps around like a belly band, clips in the middle there, and you just sew 2 loops on it. And these are, we'll give you a better view of that. It actually hangs off completely as a loop. You could either do it that way or connecting along the strap. This is probably a little more flexible, might be a little easier. Yeah, so there's that. It's just a matter of then, once I get the dog in it, I have these knots here. It's just a taut line hitch, and that'll allow me to snug up this line to whatever the appropriate length is. Now, depending on what you're using for that, you might want some kind of a bungee in here. I don't have one yet because this utility cord is actually pretty stretchy all on its own, so I don't think it's necessary. Might change my mind on that, but otherwise a small piece right up on this end could be good, and then you just change where your joining point is. So next up, I'll get the dog out here and see how this actually works. Okay, so here we are with the dog hooked up. So you get a little bit of a better sense of how this harness works when it's on him now. Those attachment loops are right there, kind of in the back of the shoulder. And there's this other strap that goes underneath. That's the rest of it. That's how that's lining up there. See from the top. Yeah, we'll get going in a minute. I'm actually not thrilled with how far forward I let these stick right now. That's probably a bit too much. So I need to adjust the position of that knot or find some other way to hold this a little farther forward. And you're going to want this to go far enough that it doesn't pop out through the loop, but it doesn't need to be this much. That might kind of interfere with him, although we're not going to be turning a lot either, so that's fine. And back here it looks like getting this on, we got a little tangle, so I'm going to have to undo that before we actually start walking. And back here you can see I put a little bit of weight in. They're just some paving bricks I had. So probably not a Burley recommended load, but it works. So, give me a second to adjust this maybe. Flip that around. And you can see I've made it so that these are taut, because you do want to be pulling by that line, not by the stays. The stays are going to be what keeps it from going forward, not what you actually are trying to pull with. So, did I mess up this side? Oh, there we go. Okay, now, okay, hike. So I realize I need to correct something I said earlier. So I talked about being able to add those side loops for the stays to, I think I said an X-back harness. That was wrong. It has to actually be a freighting harness. You're going to want this spreader bar in the back. So those will be called freighting or weight pull harnesses. And then you just add that extra line to make it a carting or drafting harness. But yeah, you could, if you were working with a light load, an X-back would be okay. But for this kind of thing, I'm usually trying to put a fair bit in there. And so it's going to be better if you have that spreader bar in the back. So I just wanted to say that real quick. Alright, so here we are. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the materials I have here. So these stays, in terms of sizing to fit into those brackets, These are marketed as 3/4 inch PVC pipe, which refers to the inner diameter. The outers are 1 inch. And that's a loose but not sloppy fit. If you could find something that was just a titch bigger, that'd be nice, but I don't know that that's actually made, or certainly if it is, it's not easy to find. And I talked about the straps and coming from something else. That was from a Clam Outdoors ice fishing pole harness for a person to be able to haul a sled across the ice. So the straps inside of that are what's dictating my length. And I believe that's either 7.5 or 8 feet long for the total stay length. I think the shortest you could get away with, maybe 5 or 6 feet before you start running out of room to put that connection in the back. And you know, on the long end you could go 10 or 12. So beyond that, I mean, if you're too long, it's just going to be unwieldy to transport and work with and take any sort of a corner. If you're too short, then it doesn't track as well. So you just have to decide what the priority is for you. If you're in a big open space, longer might be better. If you're running into street signs and trees and things, maybe not. Going to that road. Whoa, good. And I do also want to say a note about compatibility. I've only shown you the left side really, but you've got exactly the same brackets over on the right. And that is not true of all Burley trailers. So you'll want to make sure that you're working with something that'll work with that. I do have the list here. It's most of the new things. So it's the 2007 through current Delight model, as well as there was a 2009 Delight ST, 2007 through current Solo and 2009 ST, 2007 through current Encore, 2008 through current Cub, 2008 through current Tailwagon, and what we're working with here, the 2009 through current Nomad, and also the 2009 to 2013 Flatbed. So stuff before those 2007, 2008, and 2009 dates had a totally different kind of hitch, where there was just a pivot pin here that something slid over, and then there was a catch in the front and back of that. So you put it on the pin and then pivoted into the catches, and that was only on the left side. Now I don't know why they changed it with the flatbed, but the flatbed after 2013 has this kind of hitch, but only on the left side. They took it off the right. I don't know why that is. And these are also what's required for compatibility with their hiking, walking kit and the We Ski attachment. And if you're wondering why I'm not just using those, it's because their poles are aluminum and they have an elbow bend right here that puts it up at an angle to a human waist instead of a dog's shoulder, which puts it just too high for the dog, and then you'd be working with the front of the trailer being right down by the ground. So I wanted to use straight poles, and that's why I'm just using these PVC things. The other thing you can see, the trailer is wider than the dog, obviously, so working with a flexible material so that they can bend in a little bit is useful. If you're working with a relatively thin-walled aluminum conduit, that would probably also work. Any of the PVC should work. If you had anything with too thick of a wall, it might get unruly and try to spread them apart, and that'd be a problem. So I think the dog is ready to keep moving. One other thing I'll say, right now I have a 6-foot leash attached to the back of his harness. That's not really ideal. You end up walking right next to the trailer and it's kind of awkward. What you would want to do, here, let's go. Hike. Come on. This would be a really good use case for either a long training line or a retractable leash. You'd probably want something that was at least 10 or 12 feet, depending on what sort of stays you had. If you had these stays, I'd want at least 12. If you were in that 5 or 6 range, 10 would probably be enough. and then, you know, maybe up to 20 feet, depending on how far back you want to be. And then you could just walk back here behind the trailer and not have the leash that you just dropped on the ground catch like that. So this is just what I had handy. A retractable would be nice. Heck! Get that in the center, won't be an issue. And you can see that all these lines are taut in the back. That's important to make this ride right. And if anyone's asking about weight, I have 2 of those patio bricks back there, and the total of that is probably 50 or 60 pounds. These trailers are, this particular one at least, and most of the Burleys I think, are rated up to 100. And you just have to be careful with how you distribute that and what your tire pressure looks like and things like that. But we're gonna finish walking home. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. Thanks.